and gentlemen, boys and girls, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing today our guest speaker, Jonas Cain. A little bit about Jonas. He had capitalized on he has capitalized on a two-time decade of entertainment, and he took that to the streets of magic. And he is here to help us overcome adversity in work, not that we have any, in home or outside our world, and he's going to do it by showing us that magic is golden. So let's all welcome Jonas Cain!
Thank you so much. Oh, before we begin, we have a question in the front row. Yes.
Hey, I'm serious. Are you really going to do magic? Because if you can you make the rest of the afternoon disappear?
That's a very good question. Unfortunately, I don't take requests, but thank you very much. Thank you very much for asking. Well, thank you again also for that wonderful introduction. I'm very excited to see what I'm going to actually do now. Whenever I get started, people always say you're supposed to start off with some sort of a joke. The idea is it loosens up the crowd, gets everyone excited, but one thing about this is you folks seem pretty loose as it is, so I don't think there's any reason to start with a joke. What I thought we'd do instead is start off with what we might call an intellectual thought experiment. Everyone go. And it goes like this. With a knot tied in the handkerchief, is it possible to get the knot out without me untying it? Is it possible?
Yes.
Yeah. That's the right answer. What's your name, sir?
Mike.
Mike, that's the right answer because, well, one, it's a magic show, so it's possible. Some of my favorite answers that I get from folks is, if the rule is I can't untie it, just have someone else do it for me. That's one answer. Another answer is, if the rule is I can't untie it, just take a sharp pair of scissors. There's more than one way to have a successful outcome, but as Mike understands, this is a magic show. All we have to do is wave the magic hand. Ooh. It's the sound of magic. Watch close. Everyone go, ah. Every time I do this, people always say to me, they say Jonas. Because that's my name. They say, do it again.
Do it again, Jonas.
Thank you.
Jonas, do it again.
Thank you very much, Sherry. That was almost on cue. We're going to do this again. However, there's a rule in magic. You're never supposed to do the same trick twice for the same audience. You know why that is, right?
I don't.
We'll figure it out.
Because they're going to figure it out, right? You've already seen it. This is not going to be a surprise. However, there is a loophole, and this is the loophole. If the rule is that I can't do it again, well, we just have Mike do it. Mike, you're going to hold onto the handkerchief, one hand on each side. Just pull it nice and tight. Now take, let go with your right hand. Hold it up high so everyone can see. All right, turn and face everyone. Do the little magic wave with the...
Make a noise.
It's a different kind of magic wave. We could go on the road. Mike and I are going on the road. It's Magic Jonas and Magic Mike. It's going to be a great show. Whenever people find out that I'm a magician, people often ask me, they say, Jonas, how did you get started in magic?
Jonas.
You see, we're learning. This is good. I'm going to set this right here. Well, I was 12 years old when I learned my very first magic show. I did my first show. I did it right out of this box here. I made it myself. Perhaps you can tell. And there was about 12 or so people gathered around in my parents' living room. And inside the box, I had some giant-sized cards. I used big giant-sized cards because this is kind of a big deal.
Because we're all proud.
Oh, and that's the other reason. So everyone can see them, right? But here's the idea. I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 humongous cards. I placed one of the cards away, and even though I placed one card away, I still had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cards. Everyone was stunned silent, just like this. But then all at the same time, everyone threw their hands up in the air and they said, "That's amazing!"
That's amazing!
All right, that was good for most of you. Some of you, I didn't see the hands. I didn't hear that that's amazing. But here's the thing, I don't blame you folks. I blame me in the story. See, the story didn't engage you enough. I'll tell you a slightly different story about the very first magic show I ever did. I was just 6 years old. I did my very first magic show right out of this box. I made it myself. I didn't know how to spell yet. I was only 6, I was having trouble. There was about 100 people gathered around in my parents' living room. This story is at least 50% true. I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 humongous cards, little tiny 6-year-old hands. And I placed 1 and 2 cards away. And yet I still had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cards. Everyone was so amazed they threw their hands up in the air and they said, "Amazing!"
I'm a little slow.
That's okay. I can appreciate that.
So can we.
That was much, much better. I even got the point, right? But we're just missing one thing. If we just tweak this one little thing, this is going to make it so much better. It's a little thing. We need a little more excitement. All right, so I'm going to tell you a slightly different story about the very first magic show I ever did. I was just 3 years old. I did my very first magic show right out of this box. I didn't even know how to make words yet. I was having trouble. I was only 3. There was about 1,000 people. As we dropped the box, there was about 1,000 people gathered around in my parents' living room. My mother was getting nervous. We were running out of chips and drinks. But then she ran to big wine. Everything was better. I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 humongous cards, little tiny 3-year-old hands, and I placed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 cards away. I was only 5, or so actually I was only 3. I didn't know how to count yet. I was having trouble. So of the 5 cards, I put 9 of them away. And yet I still had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cards when all the cards disappeared. Everyone was so amazed that everyone said, "Amazing!" Yourselves a big hand. Isn't this fun? We should do this every Thursday. What are you folks doing next Thursday?
This time we're at the bar.
You're going to be at the bar.
Thursday, Friday, you know.
I like you. Different kind of show.
I passed the sexual harassment thing last week.
I had somebody third time's the charm, right? Speaking of jokes, a lot of the jokes that I like to tell are from this book right here. Have you ever read this book before? It's called Absurd Jokes. Have you ever read it?
I wrote it.
Oh, you wrote it down? It has my name on it. I don't know. He cheated again. I don't know what's going on. But this is filled with some of the most absurd jokes you're ever going to hear. This has such classics as, let's see. Oh, okay, this is a good one. Why do trees make such great detectives? They can get to the root of the problem. Absurd jokes.
Absurd dad jokes.
Are you a dad?
Yeah.
You can use these! But speaking of trees, do you know why the leaf was so brave? Why? Because it was used to being out on the limb. Okay, enough of the absurd jokes. We have a dad back here. What's your name, sir?
Mike.
Mike? Another Mike. Oh my goodness.
We're all Mikes.
All Mike.
Everyone is Mike here. Is Sheriff's name Mike too?
Our husband is.
Is your real name?
Yes.
All right, Mike. I'm gonna flip to the pages of the book. Wherever you say stop, that's going to become your page. And we'll put the book, don't worry, I won't make you read another joke.
Okay.
But just say stop anywhere you like.
Stop.
Are you happy with this page? Or would you like to change your mind?
I'm gonna change my mind.
Oh, typical guy. Just, right here, are you happy with this page?
Yep.
All right, the bookmark goes in, you're going to look at the very first word of the page. Now mind you, every page at the very top says... Oh yes, we're going to need some eyes. At the top, every page says absurd jokes. Don't look at the word absurd. Technically, that's the first word, but I would know that's the word. You look at the first word of the actual text of like a joke. Look at the very first word on the page, but don't tell us what it is. You see what it is?
Yep.
If I ask you later, you'll be able to tell us?
Hopefully.
You have a good memory. You may hold on to the book.
You can write it down.
Yeah. Inside my pocket, I have a piece of paper with a word written down. Mike number 2. Is it possible that the piece of paper in my pocket has your word written on it? Is it possible?
It is possible.
I like that anything is possible when we work our magic, right? I like the way you think. As soon as you say the word, I'm going to pull the piece of paper out. As soon as you say the word, I'm going to open it up. I'm going to show everyone your word. Are you ready? What is your word?
Eat.
Eat. On this piece of paper that was inside my pocket, there's a word written down. Please tell everyone, Mike, what is that word?
Eat.
Give him a nice big hand. You see, it's easy to be confident when there's no possible way to fail. Well, actually, this isn't a bridge copy, so I guess it wasn't possible. But it was highly unlikely that we would fail. Here's the thing, though. I know that you probably thought I meant there would be one piece of paper with one word written down. The problem, though, but what I said was true, right? I said there would be a piece of paper in my pocket. I didn't lie. It's just that we interpret it a little bit differently, right? But for those of you who did think there would just be one piece of paper and one word, in the back of the book here, there's a special piece of paper. On one side is a little picture of me. And on the other side there's a word written down. What was your word again?
Eat.
Eat. Wow.
That's amazing.
Mike, you may keep the picture of me as a souvenir and the book as well. You may keep the book as well. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Very well. Absurd joke of the day. I like them. Policy here.
Correct.
There we go. You see, in order to do this sort of thing, we really need to have a good imagination. Because really, when we're trying to experience magic, we're asking people to experience things that really aren't possible. Because if it was possible, it wouldn't be magic, right? So we really have to be able to see things that other people can't see. Who here has a good imagination? By show of hands, who has a good imagination? No one. No one at all. All right, well, let's...
Ricoh's taking it away from us.
Is
You can be really creative.
Sherry has a great idea.
Is that you have a good imagination?
Let's hear it for Sharon.
Pick on Frank. No, Frank, yes.
Pick on Frank.
The battle of the minds here. Well, let's try it this way. We're going to pretend that I have a deck of cards. Or can everyone see the deck of cards?
Yep.
It's easy to do because we do have a deck of cards. The hard part is we're going to have someone choose a card. Eeny, meeny, miny, moe. Catch a tiger by the toe. That sounds really dangerous. Why would you catch a tiger by the toe? Eeny, meeny, miny, moe. No, you're going to choose a card. I'm just going to drop my hand along the cards. Wherever you say stop, that's going to become your card. Just say stop any point you like.
Stop.
Right there, take a look. Don't tell me what it is.
Okay.
I'll show the people around you as well.
Okay.
And we'll let you hold out your hand. Now watch. At no point do my hands leave my arms. You may put your other hand on top. Now remember this. As soon as you looked at a card, I gave you the deck of cards.
You did.
You could have stopped anywhere you wanted to. And yet, inside here, remember those giant-sized cards we had a moment ago?
Yes.
I have another one right here. Your card. You think it's on here?
It probably is.
It probably
Because you're pretty good.
Right now we realize.
Yeah, because you're pretty
I
good.
am. Thank you, I appreciate it. Can I get that in writing?
Gosh darn it, people like you.
Steve Martin? No.
Daily affirmation.
Yeah.
Short, smallly.
I'm going to show you, yes or no, loud voice. Is your card on here, yes or no?
It is on here.
It is! Give her a nice big hand! Yay! She put a big any card.
Any card.
And it was on here. Thank you for not hesitating on your answer. It is. Her card really is on here.
It really is.
Mike doesn't believe us. I will show you what's going on here. We were talking earlier about how it's easy to be confident when there's no way to fail. This way, there really is no way to fail. Because every card is printed on this card. So really, whatever you would have said, or if it was you that picked out, whatever you would have said, whatever card you would have stopped at would have been your card. But here's the thing, there is a way to fail at this. It looks like it's a safe trick, but there is a little bit of danger. If you hadn't seen a card, what card did you, it's okay if you say it, what was your card?
Two of hearts.
The Two of Hearts. Right there, Two of Hearts. If you didn't see the Two of Hearts, this would not have worked. How many twos are in a deck of cards?
Four.
Four, right? There's four. I'm interested to know how many twos are in that deck. Please turn the deck face up and count how many twos you find in the deck.
Okay, how did he do this?
They're all what?
They're blank. There's no.
Let's have to show it. Now remember, you, as soon as you looked at a card, you took the cards from my hand. At no point did my hands leave my arms, meaning Sherry really does have a wonderful imagination.
And I am what? Amazing.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. You did a great job.
That was pretty good.
Seeing things that aren't even there.
I've done that before.
That's because you're usually at the bar right now. I know your hobbies here. Seeing things that aren't really there. That's what magic is all about. That's what, when we're working our magic, that's what we have to do. I'm not sure if you know this, but there was a study by scientists. This is true. I Googled it, so it must be true. I read it actually in an article in National Geographic. It said that scientists now believe that horseflies don't bite the zebras because, you know why? Because of their stripes. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know the science behind it, but according to this article, it said that it had something to do with the reflective Polaroid light that was coming off of the coat of the zebra. The horseflies get distracted by that, and even though they're looking for something to bite, to feed off of, they don't see what's right in front of them. So even though they're looking, they're not seeing. And there's a fun little sort of brain teaser game that we can play with this to show you how this can happen in life. It's called the square game. Everyone go. Anyone here have good math skills? Anyone with math skills?
I'm going to call a pricing analyst.
Any pricing analysts here? Not at this time. Well, we're going to expand our horizons then. Let's see. Oh, we did this a moment ago. I know we did the eeny, meeny, miny, moe earlier. Let's have Frank here help us out with this. How many, pretend these are equal squares. I took out my ruler, but it's probably a little off. But how many squares do we see here? 16. That's the answer. That's the first response answer. That's the logical answer, right? That's our gut instinct. That's what we see. But sometimes we're looking, but we're not seeing. How many? 17. Oh, so we could take the whole thing as a square, right?
21. That's a rectangle.
Oh, well, that's a rectangle, right?
27.
27. Can I get 28? 29. When we look at it closer, now, beyond 16, right, we could take the whole thing as a square, but we could take 4 squares together to make a square. We can do that 1, 2, 3, 4, we can do that 6 times. We could also take 3 squares together. We can do that 1, 2, we can do that 4 times, right? So by taking a step back and sort of looking at it beyond just the gut instinct or response, even though we're looking but we're not seeing, if we look a little deeper, I personally counted 30, I think someone said 40 something, who said 40 something?
They were smoking something.
Oh, they're smoking something.
They're in sales.
Oh, I see. So if you're looking at from the other side, I like the way you think, sir. What's your name?
Andy.
Andy? Andy?
gonna say Mike.
You're gonna help us out.
All right,
Andy? And this is gonna be, this is simple math. Any 1-digit number between 1 and 9, which one would you like to use? 7. Sure. Folks can see this too. So we have 7. Andy, choose anyone else here. Choose anyone else. Could be someone near you, someone far away from you. Just choose someone else.
Greg.
Greg.
Yes, I saw you look
A friend of yours? Greg. Same thing. You're a name. Any different single-digit number between 1 and 9. 9. Would you like that to the left or the right?
Right.
To the right. Okay. 9. So we've arrived at a random 2-digit number, right? Andy and Greg didn't know that they were going to be picking numbers. We could have put the 9 on the other side. So we've arrived at a completely random number. I asked if you folks are good with math because I'm terrible with math. Logic is not one of my strong suits, which is why I had to study philosophy in college. But there is one kind of mathematical equation that I've been practicing. I'd like to show you what I can do with this. Does anyone have a watch with a second hand? Mike does? You have one? All right, Mike is going to be our official timekeeper. Oh, yeah. Yes, we're going to need eyes for this. So as soon as you say go, I'm going to start inputting my equation to work on this grid. So as soon as you say go, I'm going to start.
Go.
Let's see, 4, 9, 6, 60, 10, 5, 3, 61. Time. How far did we get?
21 seconds.
21 seconds. I did this earlier today, just sort of practicing. I did 30 seconds. I think under stress, I was able to speed it up a little bit. I hope you can read my writing. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you. A lone clap. It takes a lot of bravery to be the lone clap. Or a lot of sarcasm, I don't know. Here's the idea. Now, I did it a little fast. That's a neat.
Every column 7, then.
Oh, someone said it. Who said it?
Mike.
So, Mike. You see, if we look closely, we have the number 79, not just up here, but we can go 8 plus 11 is 19, plus 2 is 21, 21 plus 58 is 79. We have 1 plus 59 is 60, plus 7 is 67, plus 12 is? We have 60 and 4 and 9 and 6 is?
79.
And 10, 5, 61 and 3 is?
79.
That's every row is 79.
Diagonal.
Oh, I'm hearing the diagonals, that's right.
Yeah,
8 plus
yeah.
59 plus 9 and 3, that's 79. 58
Wow.
and 7 and 4 and 10. If you need a calculator, please get it out. All the rows, both of the diagonals, just when we think that there's no possible way that they could equal even more, we did the rows, but we can do the columns too. 58 and 12 and 6 and 3, that's 79. 2 and 7 is 9, 9 and 9 is 18. 18 plus 61 is?
79.
11 and 59 and 4 and 5 is?
79.
8, 1, 60 and 10 is?
81.
You guys are very great. All the rows, all the columns, the diagonals, just when we think there's no possible way that we could look and not see anymore or see anymore, but we can. Remember we were saying you can take 4 squares together. If we take 7 and 2, that's 9. That's 9 plus 12 plus 58. That's 79. 12 and 6 and 9 and 7 is 79. We have 8 and 11, 51 and 1, 60, 64. 10 and 5 is, the ones in the middle, 59 and 7 is 66, plus 9 is 64, 65 plus 4 is 79. Isn't this fun?
712 minus 6.
But then, this is beyond the 4 touching each other. We have 58 plus 3. That is 61. Plus 10 is
71,
71 plus 8 is.
79.
Give yourselves a nice big hand. I'm gonna leave this out if you want to take pictures of this later. I'm terrible at math, but I've been practicing this. Let's leave this up here. So I'm very excited to have this opportunity today to share with you not just my math skills, it's very little, but also to share with you folks my positivity and magic. Specifically, as Sherry said, I've been practicing magic now for well over 20 years. And what I've come to understand is that what makes for a successful magic show has less to do with card tricks, it has less to do with things like sleight of hand, and it has much more to do with being able to manage to get along with other people. You see, every time I walk out on stage, every time I walk to the front of a conference room, I'm walking into a situation where I have to work with people that I've never met before. And I have to learn very quickly how to either get them on my side, or at the very least, align myself with their side, so we can have a successful outcome. One of my favorite quotes comes from President Theodore Roosevelt. He said, the most important single ingredient for the formula of success is knowing how to get along with people. And really, I'm sure in your experience in sales, and certainly my experience in magic, this really is the case, because I could be the best magician technically, but if I haven't demonstrated genuine care and mutual respect and understanding, well, no one's going to care if I can find your card or not, right? So the real secret to magic is really learning how to work together as one. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today. Before I leave here, we're going to be touching on 3 big ideas that I've learned along the way to help me become a successful performer, so that these ideas could also make a difference in your life. Now, some of the things we're going to talk about are perhaps things that you've never heard of before, in which case we have those little handouts, you have pens. I hope you take some notes. But some of the things we're going to talk about are probably things that you have heard before, in which case, I certainly hope you take some notes. And I say this because I know from personal experience, one of the biggest gaps in our lives is the gap between what we know and what we actually do with what we know. So I encourage you, if today you hear something that you've heard before, instead of saying the logical responses, oh, I've heard this before, ask the important question, up until today, what have I actually done with this information? But before we get to that, a number of years ago, I was invited to be the guest judge at a talent show in my hometown. Anyone ever been in a talent show? No. Yes? I heard a yes? Okay, I heard a yes. Did you ever judge a talent show?
No.
No. Being in a talent show is fun, right?
Yeah. If things go well, sure.
Did it go well?
It did.
What's your name?
Alex.
Alex, what did you do in the talent show?
I sang in the talent show.
Are you going to sing for us today?
No.
No.
If you're at the bar, maybe.
Oh, okay, so next week, we're hanging out at the bar.
Or this afternoon.
Or this afternoon, whichever the case may be. I was excited about judging the talent show, but I was also nervous. And I was nervous because I'm a terrible critic. And here's why. I'm the type of person who can find something that's 99% awful, but I can find that 1% that's actually good and get behind it 100% with encouragement. Great skill to have if you're a manager, right? Great skill to have if you're a teacher or a mentor. Horrible if you're a talent show judge. But that said, my gut does know a terrible act when I see it. So having this opportunity to take a step back and sort of quantify my feelings, quantify my gut, it was a great practice in practicing more logical thinking, getting out of the emotions and moving into a more rational state of mind. So before we go any further, I'm going to give you folks the opportunity now to sort of rate yourselves, to quantify where you think you are in the area of getting along with others, in connecting with others. A simple rating of between 1 and 5, with 5 of course means you're perfect, there's no possible way that you could ever get better. And then 1 is where you could use a lot of work. And then of course 2, 3, or 4 is when you're somewhere in the middle. I'll just give you 10 seconds. So as we go over the ideas that we're going to talk about during the rest of this presentation, as we go forward, just think about what it's going to take to just plus 1, whatever your number is. How can you plus 1? With that in mind, we have a little fun little game that I like to play. I usually do this when I'm doing maybe a longer event, if I'm doing a multi-session event. I like to use this as an icebreaker, especially for people who don't know each other. But I'm gonna do a version of this now. I would have a number of cards. I just have 5 of them here. But this is how it would play out. I would have a number of cards. I would call each person up one at a time. And I would have them choose one of the cards. They would look at it without anyone else seeing what they saw. And then they would write down a 1-word description of what it was. The idea, we would do this with everyone in the room, so everyone would get a chance to choose one of the cards, come up with a 1-word description. Now the thing is, even though we had multiple cards, every card has the same image. It has the same thing. And yet, even though it has the same image, I get different answers. I usually get 2 different answers. Sometimes we get some outlier answers because there's a fun person everywhere. But more often than not, people say one of 2 things. So I'm going to just show you what the image now. Don't say anything out loud just yet, but think about if you had to commit to a 1-word description. Well, I'll show you for 2 seconds. Did everyone get a chance to come up with their 1-word description? I'm going to count to 3. When I get to 3, everyone's just all at once. We're all going to say what the word is that you would describe this as. 1, 2, 3. Hyphenated words work too, I guess. Which one? Max. Yes.
What did he say?
Oh, he said rabbit duck. That's the kind of thinking we need here. So the idea is, even though it was the same image, what you would use to describe it was probably the first thing that you saw. Now, a lot of people said rabbit, people said duck, or bunny, but really it depends on how you...
Chocolate.
Oh, chocolate bunny. Who said it? This guy? Hey. Andy, right, Andy? Okay. I like the way, yeah, it kind of does look like a chocolate bunny. It looks like this, right?
Oh my God.
Little bunny ears. But then if we shift our perspective, now that's a duck bill. That's a duck tail.
That's weird.
It's the same thing. It's the same situation. But we have multiple different experiences, right? There was a book that came out that talks about this idea. The idea is that everyone has their own different representational system that they use to sort of describe and understand and process the world around them. The book is called Am I Making Myself Clear? And if you're interested in it, it's by Terry Felber. And the idea is this representational system, it's based off of our 5 senses that have been sort of drilled into us through conditioning and repetitioning. So depending on your representational system, you might have seen the bunny or the chocolate bunny or the duck or the rabbit duck, depending on what your conditioning has been, and also perhaps depending on the things, on the context of it. As an example, in the book he talks about how several people could be walking down the beach, and then later on that day they could be talking about this experience, but one person might describe how the sun felt on their skin. Some person might talk about the sound of the waves. Another person might talk about the smell of the salt in the air, depending on what their representational system is about. And he goes on to say in the book is that if we're able to understand what other people are experiencing, understand what their world is, and we actually try to experience it ourselves, our communication is just going to be so much more effective. Even though earlier we talked about how the single piece of paper, or the piece of paper in my pocket with the word, communication can be difficult when we're not clear, when we're coming from our own representational system versus others. So what this is talking about is it's going to help us to sort of get into another person's world. And this is really important. I've experienced it, at least in my own personal relationships and business too, where communication can be difficult. And this is probably why personally I'm not married anymore. I miss her. But being able to relate to other people, being able to step into their world is going to really help us to understand. In fact, I'm reminded of the joke. There's this, I made it disappear. This magic can happen at any time.
It was a marsh.
That's amazing. Maybe they'll find her someday. I don't know. Good chipper. Oh my goodness. I'm not sure if you've heard this joke. I saw this cartoon once. It was of this elderly couple that was off for an evening stroll one evening, and the husband was feeling romantic, so he turned to his wife. He said to her, he said, "Honey, under the moonlight, your teeth look just like pearls." Beautiful sentiment, right? But to this, the wife turned to her husband and said, "Who the heck is Pearl? And what were you doing with her under the moonlight?" The problem with communication is the illusion that it's taking place. It's difficult when we're not even on the same page, but it's especially difficult if we're not even working from the same book, if we're not working from the same representational system. We all need to find that other person's worldview and connect to them, not from where we are, but from where they are. People don't like to be told that they're wrong. Everyone hates that. I know I hate to be told that. So if we're able to meet them where they are, make that first move, then our communication is going to be so much easier. But there are some barriers to the common ground that I'd like to go over, because perhaps you've experienced these when working with customers, working with each other maybe, or even working at home. The first barrier is the assumption barrier. Well, this one says, I already know how others feel, I know what they know, I know what they want. It's the assumption. The arrogance barrier, this is the one that says, oh, I just don't need to know what other people know. I don't need to know how they feel. I don't need to know what they want. The third barrier is the indifference one. This one says, I just don't care. Yeah. I don't need to know. I don't care. Lastly, number 4, this one is about the self. This one says, it's control. I don't want other people to know what I know. I don't want them to know how I feel. And I don't want them to know what I think. So to help us overcome these barriers, one of my mentors is a man named John Maxwell, and he's identified 8 different ways that we can overcome these barriers. For our purposes, I'm just going to talk about 4 of them. And if you're interested in the other 4, there's a download that you can download for free off of my website. I'll talk about how to gain access to that later. But I'm just going to go through these 4 now, because these ones are, I think, most relevant for us. The first one is to ask questions. This one says, I will be interested enough in others to ask questions. Now this involves not just asking questions, but listening to what the answer is. But beyond asking other people questions, it also involves asking ourselves questions. Questions like, do I feel what you feel? Before asking, do you know what I feel? Do you see what I see? Before asking, do I see what you see? Before asking, do you see what I see? Do I know what you know? Before asking, do you know what I know? And lastly, do I know what you want? Before asking if you know what I want. So asking good questions is a great way to break down the barrier. Number 2, this one's kind of a controversial one. This is be likable. Now, it's controversial, but it does have some truth to it. There was a former communications consultant to presidents, a man named Roger Ailes. He says that if people like you, they're going to listen to you. If people don't like you, they're not going to listen to you. So being likable is a great way to start that common ground, but there's a fine line between trying to be likable to create connection for a worthy cause versus seeking to be likable for approval addiction. There is a fine line there, but I believe when it comes from a place of good intent, then it's going to help us break down that barrier. Number 3 is to be humble. Some people see humility as a weakness, but really, some of my favorite thoughts on this comes from a poet named Alan Ross. He says that humility means knowing and using our strengths for the benefit of others on behalf of a higher purpose. He says that people who are humble, they don't think less of themselves, but rather they simply choose instead to consider the needs of others in fulfilling that higher purpose and worthy cause. All right, last one. Be adaptable. Now we saw it in the example with the magic square. Just looking at it one way, we only see 79 once. But being adaptable, being able to see things from another person's worldview, being able to see that maybe some people, maybe they're road people. We have to talk about 79 from road. Maybe they're column people. We have to talk about numbers in their worldview. Maybe they're corners people. Maybe we have to, or maybe they're diagonals people. We have to find a way to meet them where they are and be adaptable. To summarize this idea of meeting each other on common ground, there's a fun principle. Perhaps you've heard it. It's called the 101% principle. And applying this is a great strategy no matter where we are. This is when we just find the 1% of where our values and our beliefs and our goals align. So that 1%, find that 1% and then give it 100% of your effort. You two could be completely on odd ends, but there's going to have to be at some point, even if it's just you're the same members of the human race. That's a good starting point. Or, in this case, I mean, you're all on the Ricoh team, you're all on the Southern New England team, right? We all have some place where we can start from. It's often said that the most important language in the world is the language that someone speaks, right? So the most important language in business would be the language of the customer, right? If the customer speaks Swahili, we better not speak Chinese. And the most important language in Ricoh is really the language of the Ricoh team. And I'm not sure if you know this, but Sherry is a magician. She has her own magic. I'm sure you've experienced this every day working with her, but she showed me this magic trick earlier, and I think you folks would love to see it. Would you like to see Sherry do a magic trick?
Oh, yeah.
You're going to do great.
Oh, great, Jonas.
Come on up. All right, let's see it. Oh, you know what we'll do?
What?
Is this water yours, Max? I can have, well, we're just going to put it right here. Now, every magician, they need their magic potion. They need their magic wand. And of course, we need our candy.
Of course.
Of course. That's to make it a sweet show, right?
Candy little boy. Get over here, Jonas. Come on.
Sherry, I like you.
You're the only one in this room.
So we have 3 options. We have a bottle of water, we have a magic wand, and we have a piece of candy. Sherry's going to leave the room. She's going to leave the room. And what's your name? Oh, yeah. What's your name? June?
Yeah.
All right. To make sure that this is on the up and up, to make sure Sherry isn't cheating, June is going to make sure that when Sherry's out of the room, she's not peeking in, that she's not trying to listen in. Right? So you're going to be sort of the bodyguard All right, and let's see. Well, since you're here, Max, right? Max, you're going to be the person to choose an object. So it's important that you don't say what it is, because she might hear. It's important that you don't pick it up, because then when she comes back in the room, she might have seen that it was moved. So you're just going to point to one of the objects and make sure as many people can see which one it is. And then take your hand away so when she comes back in, she can't see. Make sense? We're setting up these rules to make it difficult for Sherry. All right, so Sherry, you may leave the room.
But black.
Hey, I'm following.
You're going to be the bodyguard.
Max, make it easy for me. All right, okay, Jonas, we'll go with
So whenever you're ready. Everyone see that, or as many? Okay, good. All right. No one give her any clues. No clues. She has to use her psychic magic powers.
But he doesn't, what Jonas doesn't know is that we all have a connection here. No, because I'm trying to get a vibe from him. Come on, Max, we worked together for 20 years. All right. This.
You didn't prearrange anything, did you? It was
No,
just the
I'm telling you, I survived. It's the vibes with Southern New and some vibes with Max. Absolutely. You're the man. I am not coming on the road with you.
Well, we're going to do it again. Well, we could do this again. We could. And it would have the same, even if Max chose a different object, it would still work. We're going to sort of pull back the curtains on this. There is a rule of magic. You're never supposed to reveal the secrets. Because if you do, everyone's going to know how it's done. And without the surprise, it's not magic. But we are going to pull back the curtain on this. Because it's important that you understand how this happened, how this came about. This happened because before the show, Sherry and I made a connection. And we were talking earlier about how meeting on the common ground, talking about the same language. It's important to speak the same language. The most important language in a company is the language of the team, right? The most important language, it's the language of the customers too. We have to make sure that we're serving our customers speaking their language. So Sherry and I made a connection. We came up with our own common ground language. In that language, called the bottle of water, its name became, not bottle of water, it became Come On Back. The new name for the magic wand was All Right. And the new name for the candy was Ready. So depending on which object Max pointed at, if he pointed at the candy, I would have called her back in. I would have said Ready, which is the same thing as saying candy. If he had chosen the bottle of water, I wouldn't have said bottle of water. I would have said, come on back, which is the same thing as saying bottle of water, because we met on common ground. We established what our criteria was, and we practiced it, right? We worked through it, right? So that we could have a positive outcome. Give Sherry another big And Max, thank you so much for helping us. I appreciate it. Big hand for Max.
All right, Max.
Great.
All right. So meeting on common ground, that's one of the big ideas. The last two are pretty quick ones, and these two are important. The first one is communicating and connecting. Communicating it's usually all about you. It's about what you want, what you say, how you say it. But connecting, it's about the other person, right? We've already talked about it. It's about getting to know their worldview. But it goes beyond words. It goes beyond come on back, all right, ready. It goes even to some nonverbal things. There was a study done at UCLA that discovered that the actual words that we use are very little for the weight that they have in our communication. There's so much more in our tone, in our inflection, in how we say things. For example, it's on the box 2 on your handouts. There's a little sentence there that if you read it, depending on how you read it, it could really say a number of things. Can I get a volunteer to read that sentence at the bottom of box 2? Over here, yes.
Mike,
Mike, is that really Mike?
I never said that you stole my money.
Ah, so what did Thomas just say?
Stole somebody else's money.
Yeah, he didn't steal my money, he stole someone else's money, right? What's another way we could say this? Anyone else want to try this?
I never said.
That's right. I never said stole my money, so
Somebody else said.
someone else said it. What's another way that we could say this?
I never said that she stole my money.
Ah, someone else stole the money. Right? How else?
I never said she stole my money.
Ah, so she stole something else.
It's hard.
Oh, stole his heart. That's right. Which eventually maybe she will steal his money. I don't know. So depending on the inflection, so words itself really mean very little. At the study that was done at UCLA, it says that there's 3 things to communicating. There's the words, coming back already. There's the tone of voice or the inflection. It's where we put our emphasis. But then there's also the body language. So it really comes down to the words, how we say it, and then what people see as well. And it said that the words really only account for 7% of what is communicated, whereas the inflection, the tone of voice, is 38%, and then body language, what people see, accounts for 55%. Now, if we're communicating on the phone, so if you can't see the other person, then the body language, excuse me, not the body, the tone in the way you say things accounts for 84%, and then the words account for the rest. So even when we can't see, the actual words that we say, they really don't add up to so much more. So it comes down to so many things beyond just our words. It's how we say it. Bedside manners, they call it, right? You know, there's more than one way to say something if you need to say it. People don't like being told that they're wrong. How can we connect to them on common ground using connecting beyond just our words? And there's really 3 components to this. There's, of course, our thoughts, there's our emotions, and then there's our actions. So that's connecting emotionally, intellectually, and visually. And if we fail to keep these 3 different components in mind, then they can lead to a disconnect. For example, if we try to communicate something that we personally don't feel, then our communication becomes dispassionate. If we fail to communicate something we know but do not do, our communication becomes theoretical. If we try to communicate something we feel but do not know, our communication is also theoretical. If we communicate something we feel but don't do, our communication is hypocritical. If we try to communicate something that we do but do not know, our communication is presumptuous. And if we try to communicate something we do but do not feel, well, our communication becomes mechanical. So the 3 components, our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions. Important things to keep in mind. For example, if we want to strengthen our communication and our connection with our thoughts, one way is to remember that knowledge must be experiential. Nothing can happen through you until it happens to you. You actually have to experience it first before you can communicate it to others. Experience, really, it's not only a good teacher, but it's also a great persuader. There's proof in the experience of it. If we want to communicate using emotion, then we have to remember that before we ask someone for a hand, we have to first ask for their heart. right? It's going back to the idea, instead of asking, do you know how I feel, figure out how they feel first. Connect to them on the emotional level. And lastly, for action, to let our body language speak greater. We can expand our expressions, we can move with more of a sense of purpose, we can maintain an open posture instead of a closed posture. Oftentimes when I'm in a situation where I'm trying to be friendly with someone in whatever context, one thing I try and consciously do, because I naturally just fold my arms just to be comfortable sometimes, but I have to really remember, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to send the wrong message. So communication goes beyond just words. All right, last idea is the idea that, well, we talk about common ground, we talk about going beyond words, but really connecting, no matter where you rated yourselves on the scale of 1 to 5, if you rated yourself anything less than a 5, which I hope you all did, because really, if it was a 5, then there's no point of learning anything, right? So there's always room for improvement. So there are 5 connecting factors that we all have access to. No matter who we are, we have these 5 connecting factors. Number 1 is relationships. It's who you know. A quick way to gain credibility with anyone is simply to borrow someone else's credibility. Who you know. Number 2 is insight. It's what you know. Everyone has an expertise in something. Everyone is an expert in something. So what do you know? That's a great way to gain credibility. Number 3 is success. What have you done? Everyone is an expert in something. Everyone has succeeded at something. Sharing that success will help connect you. Number 4 is ability. What can you do? People like to be around people who know how to do things, right? So being able to share that excellence with others. Number 5 is sacrifice. How have you lived? How have you lived your life? This goes back to what you do. It goes back to our actions. Our actions speaks so much louder than any words that we can say. So that's it, right? So we have connecting beyond words, we have connecting on common ground. We also have the fact that we all have these components, these 5 ways to increase our ability to connect and communicate with others. So, how about you folks now? Going back to our first idea about rating ourselves, I'm interested to know, actually I'm more interested in you knowing for yourselves. We're going to take a couple minutes, 2 minutes. You're going to just talk to each other. Individual groups, groups of 3, groups of 2. Just talk about one thing that you can start doing today. So it's sort of something that sort of jogged your thought process. You're going to talk to each other about what your next step is. All right, so I'm going to put 2 minutes on the clock. If you're in a group of 2, a minute each. If you're in a group of 3, I'm not good at math, but divide it up evenly. Starting now. Before we wrap this up, because we are done, just one little thing. My goal has been to not run into Andy. My goal has been to engage, empower, and encourage you with these ideas. So I engage you with the magic, empower you with the ideas, and then of course encourage you just now to take something away from this. But my ultimate goal is so that you can excel in your work, at home, and really beyond. But that part is really up to you. It depends on what you're going to do moving forward. So to help you in moving forward, I forward some of this information to Christine already, and actually on the back of the handouts you'll also find this. There's a website, jonascain.net/Ricoh. You'll be able to go on there, and within the next few days you'll see the full video. This whole session has been recorded, so if you want to go back and watch the match again, If you want to go back and re-listen to some of the ideas, you can do that. There's also going to be downloads for the handouts. There's also going to be, I'm putting together a customized workbook for you folks that goes into deeper content here. So if you're interested in that, you can find that there. The other thing, the evaluation forms. If you fill that out and give them to Christine at some point today, if you leave your contact information on there, you're also going to get a free digital copy of my latest book, Are You Positive? Positive is an acronym for the 8 steps that I've identified for thinking, being, and staying positive. Actually, I would like to give a copy to Sherry as a thank you for having me today. You're very welcome. But you will all get a digital copy of this if you leave your contact information on the evaluation form. If you're not interested in the book, just don't give me your name. But this has been a great time. I had a wonderful time sharing it today with all of you. I'm going to leave you with one final piece of encouragement other than the website. And this is something very important. This is the lemon. Where's the vodka? Because when life gives us lemons, add vodka, right? But this is the encouragement I like to leave. This is one of my favorite messages. It's that whatever our lemon is, whether it's complacency or just not caring or indifference, whether it's strife of any kind, instead of running away from it, we cut to the very core and get to the very center, because in the middle we'll find something that we didn't think we'd find there. In this case, it's a fortune in the form of a playing card. Oh, Sherry chose a card earlier. What was your card?
Two of Hearts.
The Two of Hearts. Are you sure it wasn't the Five of Hearts? Oh, thank goodness, this is the Two of Hearts.
Wow.